Have you ever considered that we are living in a unique time, that something world-changing is about to happen, and that it might concern you? If so, you're in the right place. Keep listening, and you'll hear thought-provoking views behind the news that point to a new and better future for all. Many people now sense that humanity is not alone. So consider this. If the Christ or the Buddha walked among us today as modern men, would we recognize them? What would they be saying? And most importantly, would we listen? Every Sunday on this program, Share International Radio, we'll examine extraordinary events that are unfolding behind the headline news. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for. And now, welcome to this week's show.
Indeed. If the Christ or Buddha walked among us today, how would you speak and act and do things differently? Today, our show is about finding our voice. And if you're listening to this show, it's because you are searching for information that corresponds to what you are already sensing. You, me, and millions of people around the world know on a very deep level that we are living in utterly extraordinary times, and we know we have a part to play in the transformation and the restoration of our planet. And we know that nothing will change unless we speak up. So let's find our voice today. My name is Cielito Pascual, and on this very rich topic here on Share International Radio, I am very pleased to introduce my co-host, my co-pilot, my dear friend, Diana Gold Holland. Diana, are you there?
I am here. I am here and very happy to be here.
Great to have you on our third show. We had Dick Larson with us on our first and second show, as you know, and I've been talking about you, so our audience is waiting anxiously to hear both of us together. Just so happy to have you on. Let me give our audience some background on you.
Okay.
You have been a Canadian correspondent for Share International magazine. That is the inspiration for this podcast. Since its inception in 1982, interviewing luminaries on the forefront of global change. You're an educator, an editor, and media specialist by trade, as you well know, and you have assisted several distinguished authors in the field of spirituality. You've written countless articles. Thank you so much for your contribution to Share International magazine. It's a all-volunteer effort. And you have written extensively on the story of the emergence of the Masters of Wisdom and the world teacher Maitreya. And you've given numerous talks for many years on that subject across Canada, in the U.S., and in Europe. And we are here to talk about finding our voice. It is so critical today. I don't think we have to go into much detail about why each and every one of us has a role to play, and speaking out is part of that role. But some of us might be a little timid. I'm a shy person myself. Share with us, Diana, why have you taken to this information? Why are you on this podcast?
Well, thank you for this sterling introduction to begin with, Cielito.
Sure.
And I'm really glad to say hello to our listeners all together. As you mentioned, I've been a correspondent for Share International magazine since 1982. And, you know, if I hadn't heard the story that supports Share International and all of the work we do at that time, I think I just might be dead by now. The world was in a very bleak state of tension back then. And it looked pretty hopeless at the time. There was the Berlin Wall was still up, the Cold War was still going on. It sounds hard to believe, and a lot of our listeners won't even have been born then. But nonetheless, it was not a happy place.
It's just to paint the picture, because I was there during that time, but I've kind of it's a distant memory. We believed that nuclear annihilation was just around the corner, that possibility existed as a reality.
Oh, it did. Yeah, we really did believe that. And we were on the brink several times in that period, Bay of Pigs and all that kind of thing. So, it was a very different reality then. But then when I heard what I know now and what we want to share with our listeners, that has allowed me to view world affairs in a much different light, a light that makes sense of it all for me. And that's why I want to share this, because I want other people to have the opportunity to think about the concepts that we're bringing forth and see, just to what extent this can resound to them, whether this energy feels new and fresh and positive, as opposed to all the dinosaur forces that are kicking and screaming their way off the world stage, quite literally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The times are changing so fast. And, if you look back over the past years, certainly we've seen so many turns in history, things that we couldn't have expected, things that were very disturbing. And all through this time, your conviction about this information, about the emergence of the masters of wisdom, the help that we have close at hand, the fact that humanity has a brilliant future ahead of us, if we so choose, your conviction has held over all this time. Why is that so? Because honestly, we have no proof that what we're saying is true.
Well, we don't in the literal sense. That's true. But, as I say, as I've watched the history unfold, knowing what I know and being able to look at it in a different way, I not only believe but realize that, the current of energy that is now streaming through at such a breakneck pace to bring us to change, to bring us to starting to create this new civilization, it is undeniable. And, I just want to reiterate, as you have pointed out, that basically, we are not alone. We have help of an extraordinary nature. And as we look at things unfolding in the world today, I and you and people who have heard this story and have taken to it have no trouble whatever maintaining our conviction, because we can see the working out of these new energies of the age of Aquarius, of the energies of love that is being brought in by Maitreya and his group, by a lot of the things that are going on in the world today, even outer things like, the proliferations of miracles through all parts of the world, in all cultures, in ways that those cultures can understand very, very graphically for themselves.
And we're talking about not just miracle phenomena. There have been political miracles. There have been miracles of change that we would never have predicted as well.
Yes, I was going to mention that next. There are political miracles happening as well. One of the most famous, of course, is the fall of the Berlin Wall that Maitreya and his group were very much in support of. But there have been other things. We forget that Nelson Mandela was once a political prisoner. Not only once, but for something like half his lifetime, if not more.
And he was expected to die in prison.
That's right. We have people like Margaret Thatcher, who was at the height of her power way back then as Prime Minister of England. It was predicted by the journalists that surrounded Maitreya at the time that she would actually fall from grace because of the poll tax in England. And that, although not one journalist would give any credence to it, did happen. The same thing with the fall of apartheid. No, not one journalist at the time would have given you 2 cents for your saying that apartheid would be cleared in our lifetimes, and yet it has come about. So, we have a somewhat pessimistic views of things happening today. But again, they're part of a larger picture which on the whole has our future, I believe, very bright.
Well, you know what, Diana, just before the beginning of the show, on the news break, the news was about the Canadian Prime Minister announcing that Canadian forces would be withdrawn from the fight against ISIS, that they would not be supporting that effort. We're hearing a lot about how the Liberals have won in Canada. Do you think that's significant, or is that just, well, it's the pendulum swinging from conservative to liberal, and then it'll swing back again? Do you think that's a significant development for the people of Canada?
Well, I'm not really a political commentator, but I can give you, a couple of views on this. First of all, I believe that the Canadian public desperately wanted change. As the government was very unpopular, the conservative government that preceded this one had brought in very measures that are against the Canadian persona, if I might say, the peacekeeper persona, the diplomat persona. We were kowtowing, I'm sorry to say, and sue me, kowtowing to a lot of the political views of the United States. And so people here wanted change, and they voted with their feet and with their votes. The people found their voice to elect this very huge majority of the Liberals. Now, how long their popularity will last, I can't tell you, but there is a breath of fresh air ostensibly happening here. And Mr. Trudeau has announced measures that Canadians have long wanted to have in place, I would think, but in general, in great numbers. And we're very happy that he's moving swiftly on arranging some of his campaign promises. Now, he has a big mandate to fulfill in that, for example, he wants to have very striking environmental reforms at last. And there is approximately only 40 days to this first great summit in Paris. So, he has his work cut out for him, but I think the momentum of change is there.
And we're going to go into a break now, Diana, because we have so much more to talk about. We'll go into the break. Please join us after the break. We've got more information. We'll talk about the influence of the media.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the Internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Greetings, fellow soul travelers. This is Dr. Amelia Kemp with OMTimes Radio. If you've been stressed mentally or emotionally, then join me on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the From Psychotherapy to Sacred Therapy show, where you'll learn you're not sick, you're sacred. And by aligning with the soul is what makes you whole.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Are you ready to shift your energy, consciousness, and limiting beliefs? Join me, Shefali Burns, every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Shifting with Shefali here on OMTimes Radio. Shift the blocks, limitations, and negative energies that have kept you from experiencing a life filled with joy, peace, love, abundance, and happiness. Are you ready to shift with Shefali? Are you ready to shine your brilliance?
conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Welcome back to Share International Radio. I'm here with my co-host, Diana Holland. Diana Gold Holland up in Vancouver, BC. I'm here in Seattle. And you will be hearing us together. We're also alternating as hosts on the upcoming episodes of Share International Radio. We have so much to cover. We'll go into more depths in future shows. So we're really glad to have you wherever you are in the world. And I know we've got listeners throughout the world. Thank you for joining us. Diana, you mentioned about the fact, I want to bring this up, I haven't mentioned this in our prior shows, that we are not the only ones obviously talking about this extraordinary story, this transition that humanity is undergoing from the age of Aquarius into the age of Pisces with the help of our wise mentors, our wise elder brothers and sisters, great teachers, the masters of wisdom. There are thousands of people literally sharing this story on a grassroots level. Right now, there's probably someone holding a meeting in a library meeting room. I know there's probably a street fair where this information is being shared. So definitely keep wherever you are in the world, look online. You can come to our website, shareontheairradio.org. To get to the events link and to find out if there is an event, a face-to-face event, where you can learn more about this story. So I just wanted to share that, Diana, that this story is going out in a very simple way. And the media is also very important to this story. Let's talk about the media. Why is the media important to this story? Do we have Diana with us? I see that she's with us, and I hope she's.
Oops! I was on mute.
Oh yeah, I knew you were there because I heard you typing on your keyboard earlier. I said, I know she's there. Yeah, why is the media so important to this story, Diana?
Well, I like to compare the media to the nerve center of humanity, in that it is the communication network. It is a media that puts our stories before our eyes and our ears and our in our papers, on our screens, etc., etc. We rely on the media for information. We rely on the media for the foodstuff that directs and informs, quite literally, our lives. So in that sense, I call the media the nerve center. But as you know, the control of mainstream media is pretty drastic. It's so complete now at this point that most people, I would venture, take a lot of what's on the regular media with a grain of salt.
I would hope our listeners do.
Yeah, I do too. But beyond the rape and murder and pillage that the mainstream media is reporting, publications like Share International are actually seeking out the real news, the helpful news, the news that you don't find out about otherwise because we're just not in the pocket, the cash-filled pocket of the media barons. So basically, the whole point here, in terms of our theme of finding our voices, the people in themselves, as we all know, are finding their voices and are attempting to use the media more judiciously. So you have, more formal things like our magazine, Share International, our program, our website, other indie publications, all that kind of thing. But the big revolution, the really important thing, that people are now taking the news into their hands. They're sharing the news on the spot as it breaks, on their cell phones, on Facebook. So much more is relying on these forms of person-to-person, direct communication that can happen from all over the world. We saw the people in the Tahrir Square.
That was all based on social media. People
Exactly.
came together based on social media.
Exactly.
And brought down a government.
And this is happening all over the place now. You know, stuff can no longer be hidden the way it has been hidden. And people being able to contemplate, to see this information for themselves, have the opportunity to begin thinking differently. We don't need to be little brainwashed cogs in the consumer wheel. That's the time for that is gone. That's finished. And we're now waking up to our consciousness as more as one family. If you take a look at the refugee crisis that's so prevalent now and so important, there are story after story of actual people, families, communities standing up and just taking responsibility, you know, welcoming these refugees into their homes and just taking care of all those basic things while the governments twiddle and twaddle about how many people they can accept or refuse or what have you. But,
yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. And I want to draw this back to, again, the media as the nerve center of humanity. Part of finding our voice is looking at things from a more current context. We're in the middle of seeing things that are of the old world, and we're also seeing things that are about the future. Young people especially have a very clear idea and very simple idea of how to transform the planet. Whereas we've had all these, you know, the media, the corporate media, will have us believe that things should be a certain way in order to keep the economy going. And young people are recognizing, no, it's destroying our planet. Let's stop it. And that's what I love about hearing from the young people today, especially, you know, I was just watching a video of the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Malala Yousafzai. She is the education activist and Nobel Peace Prize awardee, as I said. And in her speech at the UN, she said, "I raise up my voice not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard." And in your part of the world, in North Vancouver, there's a wonderful young activist. Oh my goodness, she started at the age of, she was speaking out probably before the age of 10, but the media caught wind of her when she was 10 years old, Takaya Blaney. The way that she is speaking out so simply and powerfully against the big oil interests that are threatening to degrade the land, the indigenous culture that she's from. She's calling for a ban on oil tankers in British Columbia, and these are very, very young people, not afraid to speak out against the status quo. And they're making it very clear to us that the corporate media is out of step, simply out of step, and is not making sense. And the simple solutions exist. And so, again, finding our voice, to add our voices to these calls for change, to add our voices to simple solutions is what is needed today. So if we can tie that in, Diana, to why is knowing about these masters of wisdom, do we have to believe that? Really? Do we have to believe that to take a stand and have our voice heard?
Well, we don't have to believe it. And, you know, you're talking about these young people. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the world today who are taking a stand to bring about this new, more just and saner society that we need without any notion of Maitreya or the masters being here. They are simply responding to those energies that are at the soul level, and they are listening. They are finding the voices of their souls. They are finding their voice in this way. I'd like to just give you one little quote, though, from one of the Masters of Wisdom, who, which was published in Share International magazine. And this Master of Wisdom said, and I quote, "Across the world, most especially among the young, the potent desire for change is being given expression. The young want a new kind of world, a new structure, which includes them and their aspirations. These aspirations are for justice and sharing, for meaningful work, and an opportunity to raise their families in sufficiency and peace.
It's a simple call.
It's a simple call.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have us note that raising the families in sufficiency and peace. Sufficiency is the new ideal, which should be governing us, because sufficiency is really all we need. How many pairs of shoes do you need? How many horsepower in your car? While other people are, trekking across continents with barely the clothes on their backs. And others, of course, as we know, in starvation and abject misery. The young people understand sufficiency. They're no longer taken in by the ideals of these corporate pipeline people, for example. And anybody, anywhere now can find any number of examples of people speaking out on the way it should be, whether it's the Gasland movie or movies about self-sufficiency or whatever. I mean, it's all over the place. We don't have to listen to the gloom and doom of the death throes of capitalism and the current system.
Absolutely.
It's simply on its way out. And we can listen to different and better news, much of it coming through the voices of young people who, let it be known, are not here by accident. People have come in at this time to help in this great revolution. And the Masters of Wisdom and Maitreya are simply standing behind and offering their counsel and guidance in all of this. But we are doing it. We are there on the ground doing it.
And we have help to speak out, to speak strongly. I will talk after the break. We have a break coming up about a couple of things. The way in which the Masters actually protect those who are in the line of fire. I have a story about Malala that was published in Share International magazine of the help that she received from one of the Masters of Wisdom. So, and I will also share some information about Hurricane Patricia. That has been in the news in the past couple of days. There's some interesting information, some insight I can offer our listeners around that. So we will be back, right? Join us.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Have you been searching for a perspective beyond the mainstream? Check it out. Join your hosts Cielito Pascual and Diana Gold Holland on Share International Radio for thought-provoking views behind the news, Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio. You can also find us at shareontheairradio.org. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for.
What if business could be fun? What if business is the adventure of living? What are you choosing? Where do you do business that makes it easier, more fun, or more joyful for you? We'd love to see where you do business. Connect with us on Instagram at Joy of Business or Twitter at Joy of Business. And share your pictures with hashtags BusinessDoneWhere and Joy of Business. Let's change the world with business.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Welcome back, Share International Radio with Cielito Pascual and Diana Gold Holland. Join us on Facebook. We're under Share International Radio. We've got so many friends joining us on Facebook from around the world. You can also email us if you have questions, info@shareontheairradio.org. Diana, a thought that occurred to me. I want to connect the media, finding our voice, and this amazing story of the emergence of the Masters of Wisdom all together. The interesting thing is, we discussed this on our last show with Dick Larson, that humanity has free will. We have choice. The Masters of Wisdom are offering suggestions. It's a good thing to listen to them because that's why they're masters. However, it's important for us to share this information, whether or not it's not a matter of belief or acceptance. It's a matter of accepting the possibility that we are not alone in this world, that we have help of an extraordinary kind, that the solutions to the world's problems are within our grasp. So what are ways that we can bring our voice to the media and let the media know that we know this story? What would be the purpose of that? Would that speed up this emergence of the Masters of Wisdom?
Well, there's two aspects to that. One is that, it is a smaller group that is hearing our particular information and responding to, in their way, to this call, that we are able to, act. We are able to act in partnership with Maitreya and the Masters by first making known the fact of their presence to many other people. Others at the same time, and we've talked about this, hundreds of thousands of others, are responding to the energies that Maitreya and the Masters are pouring into the world. So even though they do not know of this message, they are voting with their feet and with their hearts and minds. So that too all comes into effect. It's not technically necessary to know about Maitreya and the Masters to be able to be working with them. And in fact, we are presenting, as you and I very well are on the same page about, we are presenting this information for people's consideration only. If it has the ring of truth, if it, wakes a certain curiosity in people, by all means, there are many, many ways to check this story out further. And one of them is to go straight to our website, shareontheair.org, where there are a lot of goodies and a lot of the aspects of this story. The media itself, though, essentially, once enough people have heard about the presence of Maitreya and these great teachers in the world, once the demonstrations in the streets have gotten loud enough against the current situation, once enough people have died in senseless wars and all of the crises that are going on, once all of this comes to a head, humanity will literally demand of the media that they present Maitreya to the world.
And major media knows about Maitreya.
They do indeed.
We will have a journalist on in our upcoming shows. Stay tuned. Watch our Facebook page and watch our schedule on shareontheairradio.org. A journalist who brought together British journalists in London for a very interesting event, a meeting with Maitreya. There were representatives from some of the world's top media at that meeting, and highest level people from the BBC, from the New York Times. Many people know about Maitreya. Even world leaders know about Maitreya. But they're not going to threaten their position by talking about this event. So it is our job, for those of us who see that this information is relevant in the world, to pay attention and to begin to demand that the media start to cover the many aspects of this story. Dick Larson talked about the UFOs and their spiritual mission, the increase of sightings of UFOs, the work of the Space Brothers, the documentation of all of that. That's as much a part of this event. So it does require that we speak out. And I just want to also I'll talk about how one of the Masters of Wisdom has been a part of Malala Yousafzai's life. As many people know, she was shot point blank by the Taliban for her outspoken words on how girls deserve education. And the Taliban, they were literally bombing hundreds of schools in her region to make a statement against girls being educated. And she had a miraculous recovery. I watched a documentary about her just last night. And they didn't expect her to live. And when she saw that she was surviving, they were not sure whether she would be speaking or walking as she was. And she made a remarkable recovery. And Share International magazine reported 2 months after that shooting that, in fact, one of the Masters of Wisdom, the one known as the Master Jesus, was responsible in helping her recover so rapidly, because clearly when you hear her speak, her voice is needed for this time, and she speaks for the voiceless. So that's an illustration of how, to use a term from the movies, the force is with us. We have help. We have help when we are standing for the dignity of all humans. We have help when we are speaking and being a voice for the voiceless. So it really is of urgency that we step out of our comfort zone and make strong statements for the dignity of all people and the restoration of our planet Earth. Are you seeing that? How are you seeing that showing up in your part of the world, in Vancouver, BC, Diana?
Well, I was actually thinking about a couple of other things as you were talking, which I'd like to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Hurricane Patricia in a moment, but in Share International magazine, there are many, many stories about Maitreya and other masters actually being on the forefront of rescue operations. Being there on the ground when those earthquakes happen and the devastation occurs. They have been literally going through the ranks of the suffering and helping them. So there are things like that. Another thing that goes back a bit that really touched my heart was, again, reported in Share International, the Tiananmen Square massacre of the Chinese students that's, 15, 20 years old now? I don't remember how long. But anyways, that was another massacre. And it was reported in Share International magazine that Maitreya stood by each of those students as they were being shot, as they were being murdered. And one of the people that managed to escape from Tiananmen Square and find himself in the West wrote a poem about that whole experience. And the very, very moving thing that he said in this poem was that nobody screamed, nobody cried, nobody had any kind of reaction of that sort. And we know from our perspective that it was because Maitreya was there at the 11th hour for each of those people.
And
so
they literally experienced peace as they were being murdered.
As they were being murdered, yeah. So this is an example of, things that we know behind the scenes that are not being reported. Now, people can accept this or not. Yes. They can say this is all just stories. But, why bother to invent these stories? There's certainly no... behind the volunteer correspondents that put together this magazine, behind the volunteer editors and chief editor Benjamin Krem, who's also responsible for the writing of 16 or 17 very, very prophetic and interesting books about the different reality that's really going on underneath all of these things. There's no reason to invent any of this.
Absolutely. And you can learn more, again, visiting shareontheairradio.org. There are links to Share International Magazine. There are links to Benjamin Krem's books. You can explore more of those, and some of the books are actually free downloads online, so you can begin to learn even more right after this show if you'd like. And I will talk about I'll touch on what you said. Whenever there's a disaster, I'm always looking in the news for the miracle stories, and you can always see the hallmark of the presence of the masters after an earthquake. There's always, the media loves those kinds of stories as well. Sometimes the media can be positive, and hearing the heroic rescues, the heroic survival experiences, they always remind me that we are not alone. Yeah. And so
hey,
I will...
Cielito, let me just make one more point to that effect, because I think it's an important one. You know, many of the people in the forefront of these changes are being impressed by the energies of Maitreya and the other masters. Many of the world leaders are in sync with this information. I mean, just listen to Pope Francis as his papacy unfolds. I mean, this is the voice of Maitreya that you're hearing through Francis.
Yes,
this is the voice of the Master Jesus, and it was said that the Master Jesus would come and occupy his position openly in Rome, that he would be guiding the church. And we kind of see that happening with Francis the way it's going on. Gorbachev at the time, who, broke down the social structure in Russia and who ushered in glasnost, was doing that directly under impression of Maitreya. And certain other world leaders like that, who are bringing positive change to the world, are acting under this impression,
and
which is open to all of us.
What we can do as people is to give voice to those who are speaking out against the economic system that is sabotaging the world environment. Support what the Pope is saying around the extremes of capitalism. We can support those movements where people are speaking out, again, for the dignity of human beings. So that's another way we can add our voices to the clamor for change. So we will be right back after the break, and I promise I'll talk about Hurricane Patricia. Join us after the break.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
If you are fascinated by the information that you're hearing on this program, you can you can attend a face-to-face event if you're in Santa Monica. You love Dick Larson on our prior shows. He will be speaking Saturday, November 7th, 2015, 3 p.m. at the Santa Monica Main Library, the Martin Luther King Jr. Auditorium, on 601 Santa Monica Boulevard. So that's November 7th, 3 p.m. That's a Saturday. Talk by Dick Larson. We loved having him on this program. You'll love hearing him in person at the Santa Monica Main Library. And Diana, we want to talk about the importance, the imperative that we bring about sharing and justice. We anchor those principles of sharing and justice in this world through the power of our voices. And I want to connect that to weather patterns. It may seem like a stretch here, but this is important to know. In the past couple of days in the news, we've been hearing about Hurricane Patricia. When this show goes into archives and people are listening at another time, there'll be another hurricane if we don't make changes right away. Here's something to understand about the esoteric aspect of our physical world. There is the evolution of the devas. Deva is the Sanskrit word for angels. It's a parallel evolution to the human evolution. And the devas are the active builders of our physical world. And they do a tremendous amount of service for the human kingdoms and all the kingdoms of nature, and they also are part of keeping our weather patterns in balance. Now, here's our concern with the hurricanes. Not only are we seeing these record-breaking hurricanes with 200-mile-per-hour winds as a result of global warming and the industrial pollution that we keep pumping into the air, altering our environment, but also because we in the human kingdom are under such tremendous stress and tension, whether it's international stress through conflicts and wars, or just simply the stress of existence, living in a competitive world, a world that's dominated by greed and competition, and trying to keep up with that kind of world. We're under a lot of stress, and it's affecting the Devic kingdom, the entities that are keeping our weather in balance. So when the human kingdom is out of balance, the Devic kingdom falls out of balance, and our stress and tension affects them. So that is impacting our weather systems that are devastating entire towns, cities, and creating even more upheaval as it affects people's lives and livelihoods. So leading that back, Diana, to the principle of sharing and justice, knowing that injustice is affecting the energies on the planet. How can we take advantage of the energies streaming into this world, guided by the masters of wisdom, to anchor these principles into reality?
Good question. You want the 25 Reader's Digest version? Okay, let's be serious here. I think that the short answer to this question, Cielito, is, how can we anchor sharing and justice in this world to bring about peace? The very simple answer is going back to the very simple priorities being articulated by Maitreya. And those priorities are, for this world, very basic: food, shelter, education, and health care for each and every citizen, each and every child in this world. It's as simple as that, and yet not one single country to date has managed to bring those priorities into play for all of its citizens. It's a tall order, but at the same time, it's a very simple and compassionate one. Food, shelter, education, and health care for every citizen of this planet.
And it's extraordinary the extent to which many of us don't have access, even in this country. I'm in the United States, and it is extraordinary how many of us don't have access to basic health care, and the stress of that, what it does to families, what it does to communities, families going into bankruptcy, families losing their homes because suddenly they have a medical emergency and they can't get the basic care that they need, and they have to lose the security of that they know because of that. It's really, really tragic.
Cielito, and yet, you must have seen these things circulating on the internet. Things like, if you have a fridge and if you have food in it and if you have a roof over your head and if you have a blanket and blah, da, 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 a bunch of stuff like that. If you have those things, you are in the top 1%. And those things are things we take for granted and things that we are losing now. Maitreya says, very simply, take your brother's need as the measure for your action and solve the problems of the world.
It's such a simple statement, and it encompasses all that we need to know.
He also adds that there is no other course, and that's true. Mm-hmm. We've tried war, we've tried diplomacy, we've tried, strategic alliances, we've tried all of that kind of stuff. But only sharing has not really been tried as the answer to our current problems. And yet, as Maitreya says, there is no other course.
When I think about where I was when I first heard this message, and I'm going to assume that so many of our listeners, either they are in that place now of just a sense that we're in this very, very potent time, and there's just this calling to do something, a certain dissatisfaction with the way life is, that there's something more. And I hope that with this show we've illustrated that to some degree, and I definitely want to stress that sense of wanting to do more, wanting to make a difference, is a prompting from the soul. It is coming from at the soul level, and it behooves us to respond to that prompting, because when we respond to that prompting, we begin to demonstrate the qualities of the soul within our family, within our community, in our world. Our scope of service increases, our effectiveness increases, our sense of joy and ease increases, because when we're aligned with our soul, when we are in service to humanity, when we demonstrate the qualities of the soul, we are aligned with the laws of life. And that's another reason to begin to give voice to standing up for what one believes in, to take action. It brings about a sense of ease. It's not necessarily simple, but doors open and miracles happen when we respond to the promptings of the soul.
Absolutely, Cielito. I think we're getting nearer to the end of the program. We better...
Would you like to talk about the upcoming show that you've got planned?
Sure, we could do that, and then we can, remind people of where they can get more information if this is sounding like something they'd be curious to find more out about. Next week, I'll be hosting the show, and I apologize ahead of time if there are any technical glitches, but we'll see how that goes. We'll be talking next week with Monty Leach. He is the U.S. editor of Share International magazine, and we will be talking with Monty about the rise of people power, the all-important environmental issues, and of course, the happenings in line with how this all lines up with Maitreya's priorities and teachings. Essentially, sharing equals justice equals peace, and we can demonstrate that both inwardly and outwardly, responding to the call of our own soul and the call of Mother Earth as well.
I'm looking at the contents page of Share International magazine on one hand, and it'll be fascinating to listen to Monty because he has been a long-time U.S. editor of the magazine. Here you have Spain, growing mobilization against fracking, and then refugee crisis report, hard news, why waste food when people are hungry, Pope Francis's urgent call to save the planet. And then there is an article entitled House of Miracles. There's an article about a baby born with prayer beads. So there's a very interesting contrast of information, and yet I know Monty will explain how all of that ties together in understanding what's happening in the world. He's been doing that. His commitment has been a long time commitment, and people will really enjoy listening to him.
Absolutely. And they'll also enjoy hearing about some of the things that are carried in the magazine, such as the letters to the editor that people write in, detailing experiences that they have had personally with the masters.
So we will be back November 1st, Sunday, with Diana Gold Holland, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us. Share your comments, your thoughts on our Facebook page, Share International Radio. We are so grateful you're listening, and join us again. We're excited to do this show for you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you all. See you next week.